Hello. I know that men face difficulties peculiar to themselves. I'm married to a very nice man and I have 3 sons and I worry about all of them. And I'm fully aware of the problems that they have, both physically and socially. I am not at all anti-men. On the other hand, I am aware that there's a proportion of men who don't like women, and because they tend to be stronger and often in positions of higher authority, up till recently that was very common, they can do a lot more damage to women than women can do to them. And we have to remember this when criticising the way society gets set up by accident or design and it's disadvantageous to women. I don't suggest that it's a general feeling that women have to be suppressed, although in some cases it is, like for instance in Afghanistan. But in general, it's just because people slide into things more or less by mistake. And before I carry on, I'll tell you I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I let you know when I've uploaded a video on my Twitter, Gab and Parler platforms where I am at Granniopteryx. If you like this video, please press that like button. Please share the video. Please subscribe and remember you have to check your subscriptions. I want to talk about subscriptions in a minute, but not just yet. And also you could help my channel financially, buy me a coffee. All the links are in the description, either below or above or at the side, depending on what sort of browser you're using. Okay, let's go on with this. You see, if you look through history, you will see that there have been political and religious movements, and very often heavily supported by women. Usually with a man leading, like Jesus or Moses or Marx, but supported by women who form the troops. And one of the great examples is the revolution in Iran years ago. It was mostly a socialist revolution and very much supported by women. And then what happened? The men took over and used an oppressive system against the women, frequently sidelining them or removing them from the scene in some way. And this also happened in communist countries as well. The Russian Revolution was very heavily supported by women, fighters and agitators and speakers and intellectuals. But by the time the revolution had ground to a halt in the communist repressions of Stalin's era, women were simply the workhorses, and they got anywhere near the top echelons, and were often, as we know about people like Beria, raped by the top echelons and discarded. So it's a pattern. In my Bible class once, a professor pointed out that at the beginning of the Bible you get various Hebrew heroes and their wives, and then bit by bit there are, like Abraham and Sarah for instance, but then bit by bit there are more wives and they have less influence until finally they're not there at all in the later histories. So it just happens like that. Now there's a reason for it. Originally, women were not warriors, really, and they were not great travellers or movers and shakers, simply because they were pregnant a lot of the time, and that took up their entire world. So there's the sort of caveman type situation where the men would go out and try and find an elk to kill, and the women would keep the food supply going because hunting very often ended in failure, of course. They would keep food supply going by staying basically near the home base and digging up roots and picking fruit and that sort of thing. So there's a reason for this, and it's nothing to do with misogyny. It's just biology, really. It's the way we are. But recently this should have started to change, because women can now control their own fertility. And if you notice, in those societies where women are least regarded, there is also a social system that encourages them to be to just have babies, to keep them occupied, as it were. Occupied in more ways than one, really. So, but the worst of it is when you see women actually colluding in this. And here we have an example. I do not understand why Nicola Sturgeon was doing this. This gender recognition, I think, as I've speculated before, she just wanted to drive a wedge between Scottish law and British law and sort of split Scotland off that way. And she saw this as a way of doing it, but she got so carried away, she didn't think of the consequences, and now she's really going to be carried away, because she's brought the Scottish National Party and the whole idea of Scottish independence into disrepute with her lunatic ideas. Sturgeon, you're not supposed to make fun of people's names. That's not supposed to be polite. But if ever there was a pun requiring the expression fish out of water, this is it. Sturgeon's political crisis deepens as she undermines her own gender laws. So for those of you who haven't been keeping up with this, they've been trying to, the Scottish National Party in Holyrood, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, have been pushing a law through which allows people to self-ID, no medical intervention or certification required. Just you walk into some government ministry or whatever and you say, I identify as a woman or a man, depending on your particular taste, and then they give you, if you're over 18, it's 3 months, and then you have to go back and then you get the stamp and you are whatever you say you are. If you're 16 or over, you can do that. You have to wait 6 months. But this is, of course, it doesn't matter the waiting time or whatever. The fact is, nobody should be allowed to identify as another gender without some sort of medical backing for this. And this is what caused it. There's a case of a man who now calls himself Isla something or other. Well, we'll probably get to that. This person has been aggressive with women, and he's now, having been convicted of the crimes of aggression, has now said he's a woman, put on a blonde wig, some lippy and a pink tracksuit or whatever, and was going to be sent to a women's prison. And that worked according to Scottish law. And fortunately, it caused a national outrage. And now they've had to backtrack. But of course, having to backtrack means that maybe you aren't right about the gender recognition law. Sturgeon's claim that critics of Scotland's gender recognition reform bill are transphobic, deeply misogynist, often homophobic, Probably some of them racist as well. That's straight out of the Justin Trudeau playbook, isn't it? When those truckers came saying, we don't want to have to wear masks while we're driving our trucks. He called them homophobes, misogynists, racists, the lot. You just throw these words out at people you disagree with. And this article says it was a cynical attempt to tar perfectly reasonable opponents with the same stinking brush. The First Minister made herself look like an utter fool. No, she didn't make herself look like an utter fool. She is an utter fool. She has made a complete idiot of herself by being carried away by her own political ambitions. How could Joanna Cherry, a brilliant lawyer and the SNP's Shadow Home Secretary and Shadow Secretary of State for Justice in the House of Commons from 2015 to 2021, possibly be misogynistic and homophobic? She's a gay woman. Well, yeah, I mean, there will be self-hating gays as well. So before somebody says that, yeah. But really, Cherry, like millions of other sensible Scots, has legitimate concerns about self-identification within a matter of weeks without any medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So, okay, it's just what happens is women allow themselves to be steamrollered into certain things. So there are many women who are backing Sturgeon, and it took a long time for one of them to stand up and say, this isn't right. You simply cannot allow 16-year-olds or burly blokes to go around declaring they're trans women willy-nilly. No, nilly is not the problem. And willy-nilly is very much the issue here. Any sane person thinks that a man entering a specifically female space, women's prison, domestic violence refuge, must be nilly-willy. Yeah, good for you. Who is this? Who is this writing this? Alison Pearson. Yeah, props, Alison Pearson. Oh, press the like button. Okay, but women have been prepared to tolerate this sort of thing for a long time. How many women's, and I'll just get onto the subject of women's toilets. How many women's toilets will you see where there are just maybe 2 cubicles or 1 for women, and then the men's toilets are, because men can stand, there are 3 or 4 urinals and then a toilet. So there's no queues for the men's toilets, and there are these huge long queues for women's toilets, and women just stand around there going like that. We are not prepared to be annoyed enough about this. And that's our problem. How many women's toilets do you see with a sign showing women and then disabled next to it? Not the men's toilets, there are some, but it's far more likely that the women's toilets are also the disabled toilets because, well, women can stand and wait. Like that, very often with children with them, by the way. So the women's toilets are, you go out of any theatre to the toilets at the half time, at the interval, and you see the sort of queues that form outside the women's toilets where the men are going in, and you don't get the women just saying, right, sod it, we'll all go and use the men's toilets and they can wait. You don't get that. Women don't do that. We don't do that because we're weaker, worried about being attacked if we go into the men's toilets, and also because women tend to be a bit more polite, in general, a bit more polite, a bit more cooperative, a bit more keeping to the rules as they are set down. That's just one of the things more women do. And we get into these situations. So people feel, all right, well, if we can make a women's toilet also a disabled toilet, we can also do a transgender toilet of it at the same time. I mean, the women aren't going to care. Meanwhile, the men's toilets, yeah, well, men go in and out, hardly any of them in there. They're all in the transgender section. All right, well, yeah, that's it. Well, fortunately, the Scottish people are rebelling against this. And Yeah, and oh, I might say that the ordinary people are rebelling against 5-minute cities as well. So I'm going to be making a video about that too. Right, but that's another video. Okay, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or granbow with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.